We throw the word time around like it's just another resource, like water or money, but it's not. Time is the most finite, unforgiving asset you have. You don't get a refund on it. You can't store it. You can't earn it back once it's spent. And what's more insidious is that most people don't even realize they're wasting it until it's already gone. It's easy to believe that wasting your life is some grand, obvious failure, something catastrophic like addiction or chronic joblessness. But that's not the typical form it takes. Wasting your life is usually quiet. It's subtle. It creeps in through the little decisions, the ones you don't think matter. 10 minutes of scrolling, a task you delay again, a dream you convince yourself to wait a little longer for. You don't fall into a wasted life. You drift into it slowly, passively. And that's the real danger. There's a psychological concept called present bias. It refers to our tendency to overvalue immediate rewards at the expense of long-term gains. So we choose comfort over challenge, distraction over discipline, and because the consequences of those decisions aren't immediate, we convince ourselves they're harmless, but stack enough of those decisions day after day, year after year, and what do you end up with? Regret, an unfulfilled life, a sense that you were meant for more, but never quite figured out what that more was. Time, unlike any other commodity, is deeply linked to identity. What you choose to do with your hours consistently is who you become. If you spend most of your time numbing yourself with entertainment, well, you're not just watching shows or checking notifications. You're becoming someone who runs from discomfort, who avoids that changes you psychologically. You literally rewire your brain for passivity. And once that wiring takes hold, it's hard to reverse. Now consider this. How much of what you do each day is truly volitional? How much is chosen deliberately? If you're like most people, a large portion of your day is automated. Routines take over. Algorithms tell you what to watch. Notifications dictate your attention, and yet you still wonder why you feel aimless, like your life is happening to you rather than through you. The price of unconscious living. The more you allow yourself to drift, the more you surrender your agency, and by extension, your life. Philosophically, this is tied to the notion of existential responsibility. It's a concept existentialists like Sartre and Camus emphasized. You are radically free. And with that freedom comes the unbearable weight of choice. Most people want freedom without responsibility, but the two are inseparable. To live fully, to not waste your life, you have to carry the burden of deciding how to spend your time wisely. And that's hard. It requires discipline, honesty, and courage. Because here's the truth. To value your time properly, you have to confront death, not in a morbid way, but in a sobering way. You have to remember deeply that you are going to die, and not in some vague abstract sense, but in a very real, personal, inevitable way. That awareness should inject urgency into your life. Not panic, but purpose. Every moment matters because every moment is one step closer to the end. You don't have infinite tries. You have this one timeline, and it's vanishing as we speak. That awareness should change how you treat each day. It should make you ruthless with distraction, selective with relationship. It should make you serious, not in a joyless way, but in a focused way. You should be asking yourself consistently, is this a wise use of my time? Is this helping me become who I want to be? Is this adding meaning or just passing minutes? Yeah. But don't mishear me. This isn't about grinding every second of your life into productivity. It's not about hustle culture. It's about alignment. When you're aligned, when your actions match your values, your time stops feeling wasted, even if you're just sitting quietly with a friend or reading a book alone. It's not about doing more. It's about living deliberately. When you know what matters and you prioritize it, you live with a kind of clarity that most people never access. That clarity is rare and it's powerful. So what does it mean to not waste your life? It means waking up. It means refusing to let the days blur together. It means understanding that every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to 1,000 others. Your time is your life, and how you spend it, that's your legacy. Don't trade your limited sacred hours for things that won't matter in 5 years or even 5 days. Don't hand your attention to people or platforms that profit from your distraction. Be ruthless. Be awake. And above all, be intentional, because you don't get this life again, and every minute counts. Most people aren't suffering from a lack of time, talent, or even opportunity. What they're really suffering from is a lack of purpose, a lack of clarity about why they're doing what they're doing. And when you don't know why you're waking up in the morning, when you have no guiding structure for your actions, no deep reason to endure discomfort or pursue discipline, life starts to feel pointless. It begins to erode you psychologically, not all at once, but in the quiet, daily corrosion of meaning. This is where people lose their edge. They become bitter, restless, anxious, not because they're incapable, but because they're unanchored. Without a sense of purpose, suffering becomes intolerable. Challenges feel arbitrary. You begin to see your pain as meaningless, and when pain feels meaningless, it becomes unbearable. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, understood this intimately. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost anyhow." That's not just poetic. That's clinical psychological truth. A deep sense of purpose can sustain a person through conditions that would otherwise crush them. Now, purpose doesn't have to be some cosmic, transcendent revelation. It's not necessarily about changing the world or becoming a historical figure. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something more grounded, yet equally profound. I'm talking about alignment between your values and your actions. Purpose is knowing what matters to you deeply and then living like it. It's not just thinking or talking about what matters. It's structuring your life in a way that reflects it. The problem is that most people never take the time to ask themselves what that even is. They inherit goals from culture, money, fame, validation, without interrogating whether those goals are truly meaningful to them. And when you pursue goals that aren't authentically yours, you may achieve them and still feel empty. That's not success. That's misalignment. And the further you drift from your true values, the more anxious and alienated you become. Your soul knows when you're lying to yourself. Purpose demands self-honesty. It requires you to ask difficult questions. What do I care about enough to suffer for? What kind of person do I want to become? And what would that version of me be doing today? These questions aren't easy, but they're essential. If you can't answer them, you're drifting, and drift is dangerous. We live in a culture that glorifies comfort and convenience. But purpose doesn't grow in comfort. It emerges in friction, in challenge, in struggle. When you choose something worth striving for, something difficult but meaningful, you begin to grow into the kind of person who can carry the weight of life. That's what responsibility is, voluntarily shouldering a burden that gives your life structure and direction. This is where many people hesitate. They want to find their purpose like it's buried somewhere, waiting to be discovered. But in reality, you often build purpose by picking a meaningful direction and committing to it fully, even if you're unsure. Especially if you're unsure, purpose is revealed through disciplined action. You don't figure it all out in your head. You figure it out in motion, in responsibility, sacrifice, and focus. And don't underestimate the significance of small purposes. Raising children well, creating beautiful works, serving a community, learning something deeply. These aren't lesser callings. They are the foundation of civilization. If you can do something with care, skill, and commitment, and if it serves something beyond your ego, then that is a life worth living. It's not flashy, but it's profound psychologically. We are built to need meaning. It's not optional. When you lack it, anxiety rises, depression deepens, addiction becomes more appealing. Why? Because the human mind rebels against a life lived in vain. If your existence feels random, unstructured, unanchored, then all forms of suffering become threats rather than stepping stones. But when your life is animated by purpose, you can endure extraordinary difficulty without being broken by it. Pain becomes meaningful, time becomes precious, and success is redefined, not as pleasure or popularity, but as alignment, as coherence between who you are and how you live. You'll know you're living with purpose not by how it feels, but by how it endures. But it won't always feel good. In fact, some of your most purposeful moments will be marked by fatigue, doubt, and stress. But underneath all that, there will be a kind of stability, a groundedness, a sense that despite everything, you are moving in the right direction, that your suffering has context, that your actions matter. And that's what makes life not just bearable, but worthwhile. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a direction. You need a reason to act, one that's bigger than your comfort and stronger than your fear. When you find that, or more accurately, when you commit to that, everything begins to shift. Your energy focuses, your distractions fade, and your life begins to mean something, not just to the world, but to you. Don't wait for clarity to strike like lightning. Choose something meaningful and move toward it with everything you have, because a life without purpose isn't just unfulfilling, it's unlivable. One of the most sobering realizations you can come to is this: you are going to run out of time before you run out of potential. And that fact should scare you a little, because it means that the cost of inaction, of hesitation, of excuse making is not just lost time, it's lost possibility, lost versions of who you could have been had you only chosen to act instead of waiting for the perfect conditions, the perfect mood, we tend to assume we have more time than we do, that we'll write that book someday, that we'll fix that relationship later when we're less tired, that we'll start the business or go back to school or take our health seriously, just not this week. And so we delay, rationalize, and distract ourselves. But here's the hard truth: you don't get to choose whether time moves forward. It does. Every day you don't act, your options narrow, your energy wanes, your opportunities shrink. You're not standing still, you're decaying in place. This is what people don't understand about regret. It doesn't come from failure, it comes from inaction. Study after study on the psychology of regret shows that people don't lie awake at night tormented by the things they tried and failed at. They're haunted by the things they never attempted, the conversations they avoided, the talents they buried, the risks they rationalized away. And why do we avoid taking action? Because it's uncomfortable. It's vulnerable. To act is to expose yourself to judgment, to uncertainty, to potential failure. But that's the price of progress. Yeah. If you want to build anything worthwhile, character, a career, a relationship, a life, you have to be willing to be seen before you're ready. You have to act without a guarantee. And yes, you might fail. You probably will, at least a few times. But that's not the enemy. Failure refines. It reveals. It teaches. Inaction, on the other hand, teaches you nothing except how to justify your own stagnation. There's a philosophical point here too, and it's deeply existential. Every choice you don't make still shapes your life. In fact, passivity is itself a decision. It's just one made by default rather than design. Sartre called it bad faith, the act of deceiving yourself into thinking you're not responsible for the course of your life. You pretend the weight of your potential is too much, that it's someone else's job to define your path. And while that might protect your ego in the short term, it comes at the long-term cost of self-respect. The truth is, you can't escape the responsibility of choice. Even refusing to choose is a choice, and it carries consequences. The longer you avoid action, the more resentment begins to build toward others, toward the world, but ultimately toward yourself. And that resentment is corrosive. It seeps into everything. It poisons your perception of what's possible. Eventually, it convinces you that your inaction was justified because it probably wouldn't have worked anyway. That's not wisdom. That's rationalized fear. You see this especially in people who once had great ambition but let it die slowly through delay. They become deeply cynical, not because they tried and failed, but because they never gave themselves permission to try at all, and they can't forgive themselves for it. So they mock those who still dare. It's a form of psychological defense, a way to protect their fragile self-image. But deep down, they know they surrendered not to failure, but to fear. So what's the alternative? It's simple, though not easy. You act. You start before you feel ready. You do what's meaningful, even when it's uncomfortable. You take responsibility for your choices. And you stop outsourcing your life to circumstance or emotion. You stop waiting to feel like it. You stop waiting to be perfectly prepared, because readiness is rarely the prerequisite for action. It's often the result of it. And I'm not saying you need to overhaul your life overnight. What I'm saying is you need to move, take one honest step in the direction you know you should be going. That's all. Action, even small action, creates momentum. And momentum shatters fear. So if you're waiting, stop. The perfect time doesn't exist. The confidence will come after you act, not before. Your future, it depends on what you do today, not what you plan or think about or talk about. What you do, because regret is the cost of a wasted life, and action is the antidote.